Hello everyone, this is JG1 Barton, and I just want to go over my opinions of the state of World War II flight simulators right now. As you all know, we have 3 currently that are major World War II sims. One coming into the game is DCS with the Normandy map and that plane pack. You have Cliffs of Dover, which is the oldest of the 3, and Battle of Stalingrad. Now, the IL-2 1946 series held the top spot in the World War II category for a very long time. It wasn't the only World War II flight simulator, but it was the benchmark. It was never dethroned after CFS-3 flopped. Thanks to third-party modifications, IL-2 1946 still looks good and still has a bit of a following. It's not a bad sim, especially considering what it is and when it was released. It was only after Team Fusion took over Cliffs of Dover and turned it into a viable simulator, and especially the release of Battle of Stalingrad, that finally put IL-2 1946 out of the spotlight for World War II simulators. IL-2 1946 was supposed to be the direct successor of IL-2 1946, but we all know, or may know, that release was an absolute dumpster fire. 1C, for approximately 18 months, tried like hell to put out that fire and salvage something out of the ashes. And after that period of time, they decided to jump ship and team up with 777 and work on Battle of Stalingrad, which should be the true successor of 1946, and starting off appropriately as the first one did on the Eastern Front. Some people greeted this news enthusiastically, as Rise of Flight, that was made by 777, is a beautiful game. Others were a bit suspicious of the move, granted that Rise of Flight is still an incomplete game. It has a very slim set of aircraft. The fact that the D-12 should have the Mercedes engine in it and not the BMW. The fact that the Camel isn't as fast as it should be and doesn't climb as well as it should. There are still multiple graphics glitches and the clouds are modeled funny. And for those reasons, some people were a bit wary of the deal with 777 and watched the development of Battle of Stalingrad quite intently. Many that I know considered their suspicions a bit validated while Battle of Stalingrad developed, and the decisions that 1C and 777 were making as far as what they were concentrating on. And when the game was released, it was very readily apparent that suspicions of them not putting enough time and detail into the flight models and damage models of these aircraft were correct. Much worse is that it took until just before the release of the Battle of Kursk before they fixed the flight model of the Focke-Wulf 190A3, and that was one of their premier aircraft in their initial release, and it took them almost 2 complete add-ons before they went back and fixed one of their original aircraft. And the BF-109s don't fly like they should. They're still sloppy. The Focke-Wulf 190 stall characteristics are still absolute crap. I high-speed stalled the Focke-Wulf 190 on an online server and went into the ground backwards, literally tail first, at over 300 kilometers an hour. Plus, odd things like pressing E to start the entire start sequence that you have absolutely no control over. You don't get to push any of the buttons, but yet all of the buttons have to be pushed. So you end up sitting there waiting for the AI to go through all of the motions of starting the engine. In DCS, you have to do this, but at least you get the opportunity to hit the buttons yourself. In every other simulator, like IL-2 Cliffs of Dover and IL-2 1946, all you had to do was hit a single button and the entire start sequence would just be simulated instantaneously and the engine would start. It's much like this in Rise of Flight even. And have you ever seen the start characteristics or the start procedure for a World War I aircraft? It's ridiculous. Add to that the fact that you can't put squad markings on through the drop-down menu like you can in both IL-2 Cliffs of Dover and 1946. or put on your own custom numbers on the side of your aircraft like you can in IL-2 Cliffs of Dover and IL-2 1946. The Battle of Stalingrad series has come up short in ways that are now considered the bedrock of a World War II multiplayer flight simulator. And these failings, to me, don't bode well for the simulator's future, as it speaks to a developer or a set of developers now that are not concentrating on what they need to be concentrating on to make a successful multiplayer flight simulator. In the meantime, DCS has come out with multiple World War II aircraft modules, and those have been implemented into DCS World, as well as the announcing of the Normandy map and plane pack that would bring World War II into DCS officially. I do have high hopes for this module, but I'm also quite suspicious of it because it is also DCS, and DCS is a very high fidelity simulator. And as great as that is, the more skill that is required to be successful in the game is automatically going to narrow down your audience. This is why Call of Duty sucks so bad anymore. And this is why Crap Thunder is such a successful game. It's ridiculously easy to fly. That being as it is, I'm not sure that DCS is going to get the revenue support that they need to consider continuing a World War II genre. I hope I'm wrong. However, interesting things have developed in the Cliffs of Dover front, as 1C has partnered up with what is now Team Fusion Simulations to reboot the Cliffs of Dover series. Cliffs of Dover still suffers from a number of problems despite having been polished up by Team Fusion, who is a group of volunteer third-party developers, but there has been until this time a very limited amount of things that they could do without the source code of the game. However, that's changed. With them officially partnering with 1C over the game, they've been given full support and access to the more important bits of the game that need to be modified. So what was once the Team Fusion 5.0 update will become a full-blown expansion and repair of Cliffs of Dover. Now, I'm excited for the opportunity that Team Fusion has in this endeavor, and I hope they do well. So, in my opinion, in the future of World War II combat flight simulators, if the Battle of Stalingrad series does not address their flight model and damage model discrepancies, the game's popularity will suffer pretty substantially when Team Fusion Simulations releases their expansion to Cliffs of Dover, and when DCS releases the Normandy map. I'm sure that module is going to be fantastic, since everything else that DCS has done so far has been fairly good, although it is not without its flaws in its releases. The Focke-Wulf 190 D9 was an absolute basket case to take off and land, far more frustrating than it was historically, but those flaws were fixed quite well and very quickly. In my opinion, though, Cliffs of Dover is probably going to be the future of World War II flight simulators, and it will eventually take its throne as the successor of IL-2 1946. I think Team Fusion is going to do a very good job with this expansion, and they have the advantage of starting in the early war, so their expansions come out with later aircraft that are better performing, and the war progresses from early war to late war in an intuitive manner, whereas DCS is coming out late war and working its way backwards, so each aircraft that you'll get from here on out will be less and less performing. That is, unless DCS does the one thing I think that they have on their side, which is that late war there was a plethora of aircraft available, so there is plenty of room for DCS to include a certain geographic area in a map and expand laterally to include more and more of the variants of aircraft and the more and more experimental and the more and more rare aircraft into the game. DCS and Cliffs of Dover may end up splitting the World War II genre, with DCS taking up the latter part of the war and Cliffs of Dover taking up early and mid-war years. What I hope happens is that Cliffs of Dover drives a dagger into the heart of the Battle of series, and 1C comes back and teams up with Team Fusion, and 777 goes back to supporting Rise of Flight. Maybe once he and 777 get their crap together and salvage the Battle of series, but I don't know. I'm certainly not a psychic. If I was, you wouldn't be able to shoot me down. Until the expansion of Cliffs of Dover comes out, I will be playing Rise of Flight and DCS. Flying in DCS will also give me the chance to expand into the MiG-15 and MiG-21 and bring you guys a bit of the Fritz Schmenkel division of JG-1 in the Cold War era East German squadron. The reason why I won't be flying Cliffs of Dover until the expansion is because that game is still broken enough that I don't want to deal with it. That said, I will be one of the first in line for Team Fusion Simulation's expansion to Cliffs of Dover whenever it is released. However, that is being said to be somewhere near a year out, so that won't be happening anytime soon. And so that is what I have to say about the state of World War II flight simulators at this time and what I think the future is going to look like. If you want to watch the rest of this fight and see how it goes, I'll leave it running. If you don't, I'm done with the commentary. I don't have anything else to say, so thanks for watching, and catch you next time.